Ooh, that's the worst.
All right, hello everyone in the chat room. Hello. So Dom, we're live, but this isn't part of the edited, pristine show that most people will hear.
Okay.
So now I'm going to start that version. But hi, thanks everyone for joining us live.
Hi.
Okay.
Did everyone notice the crispness of the white wall behind me tonight?
I noticed it. It's very nice. So though, make sure to talk close to your microphone. You were swiveling there.
Like this.
Oh yeah, do like that all the time. Come on. All right, we gotta go.
Do I need to close my closet to open a crack? Such a high fidelity camera.
Oh my god. Come on.
All
we
right.
got till 10. I want to talk about like 20 players. Okay. Yes! Welcome everybody to another episode of the Keeping Carlson Fantasy Hockey Podcast, the best fantasy hockey podcast in the world, hosted by two guys who own Eric Carlson in their keeper pools. I'm your host, Neil Dubrovsky, and once again, we've got a special guest. Of course, we have the fantasy hockey robot, Brian Combe, with me as always.
Hi, am I the special guest this week? Just once, I want to be the special guest.
Okay, next week I'll call you the special guest, but right now we've got a much more specialer guest. We've got Dom Luszczyszyn from The Athletic. According to his Twitter, he is the chart boy and hockey writer for The Athletic. Dom, thanks so much for joining us.
Thanks for having me, guys.
So, Dom, when do you graduate from chart boy to chart man?
I think I could be a chart boy forever until maybe Myrtle dies and then I become the chart man.
Or you can have
Brian said this joke right before we started recording, and he cracked himself up so much, and I was like, let's save it for the show, and now this is what's happening. Brian, get it out. It just
doesn't feel authentic. Dom is going to have his chart mitzvah one day, and he'll turn from a chart boy into a chart man.
Okay.
I'll be there.
So, Dom, we're very excited to have you on the show. You have this set of projections, not only a set of projections, but it comes along with this amazing spreadsheet that's super configurable. We want to talk to you all about it. Before we get to that, though, we have to start with the number one fantasy hockey headline of the week, which is this big trade that happened overnight. I haven't had this happen very often where I wake up in the morning to a trade, but Max Pacioretty has been sent to the Vegas Golden Knights in exchange for Nick Suzuki, Thomas Tatar, and a second-round pick. Obviously, the Habs did it because Pacioretty doesn't want to play with them. He's going to be an unrestricted free agent. So I don't know if we want to spend too much time digging into the trade itself, but I'd love to talk about like the fantasy impact, especially like what's going to happen with someone like Max Pacioretty, who has been so amazing for so long, always a 30-plus, like 60-plus kind of guy. Last season was a disaster, of course. He fell off and... Sorry, I lost my breath there. Fell off and played only 64 games due to injury, ended up with 37 points in 64 games. Now he goes to Vegas. Dom, I was looking at your projections. You had him for 55 points next year. Brian and I actually also had him for exactly the same, 55 points, a little bit less than 30 goals. What do you think this trade does for Pacioretty's value? Does he go up? He's got to go up, right?
Probably just a bit. The way I do things, like it doesn't account for the quality of the team you're playing for. It's just what you've done in the past and how many minutes you get, how much power play time you get. And it's unlikely that change for Pacioretty. You'll still get 19 minutes. You'll still be on the top power play in Vegas. But obviously sometimes you got to use your brain instead of just looking at the numbers in front of you. And if they keep the Marchessault, Smith, Carlson line together, it means that Pacioretty will be on the second line with Paul Stastny, who's probably the best center he's ever played with because Montreal has never had a good center. And the fact that he's on the second line instead of the first line, he won't be facing the opposition's best defenders either. So I think he'll get 55 points according to my model, but I wouldn't be surprised if he goes to 60 or 65, maybe with a ceiling of 70.
Wow, that's high. That's a high ceiling. I guess that's assuming he's on the top power play, right?
Everything goes right.
Right. Yeah.
I mean, I think it's very fair. He's been close to a 70-point guy before on the Habs, like you say, being centered by the way, you threw some shade at like Thomas Plekanec. He's not so bad, is he? But obviously, yeah,
Paul Stastny.
No, Brian loves Paul Stastny. I mean, last year, Pacioretty was playing with the likes of Andrew Shaw and Philip Dano for the majority of his even strength time. Now, like, first of all, we assume he's going to get on the top power play. We actually had a discussion last week in our bonus episode with Daniel Negreanu, and we were trying to guess who was going to be that fourth forward on the top power play. Is it going to be Paul Stastny or Alex Tuck? I guess at this point, just forget about it. It's just probably going to be that first even strength line, like Marchessault, Carlson, and Riley Smith, and then you have Max Pacioretty and then a defenseman on that top power play.
Yeah, that's probably how I would figure things go. And even if he doesn't improve to 70 or 65 points, I think 55 points is a good bounce back, and he does enough with his peripheral stats that he's still probably undervalued compared to what his average draft position is in most formats.
Yeah. Well, my alternate theory for the Vegas power play is that they, like last year, they ran two pretty equal units, right? They had Perron and Neal crushing it like somehow on their 1B unit, so to speak. So now that they could theoretically keep Karlsson, Smith, Marchessault, and throw Alex Tuch out on that first unit with one of Colin Miller and Shea Theodore, and then the second unit has that other defenseman. Now they have they're close to having enough forwards to fill that out. And Stastny, Pacioretty, Howla, and some other guy, right? But that's how Vegas got by last year with all these some other guys becoming actual guys. So maybe they can handle rolling two units this year. So that would be my alternate thought, which I still think is a good situation for Pacioretty. And I like this trade moves what I had his projection around 55 when we did our almanac. And now I feel like that's more his floor. And 70, maybe I shouldn't have been so aghast at going that high for upside, because yeah, he had 67 points 2 years ago. So 70 is not out of the question 2 years after that. But now it's like, yeah, I believe Pacioretty can get to 55 instead of saying, well, if everything breaks all right, he can probably get 55.
Yeah, I feel like 55 is probably not, like, that seems too high for a floor, especially since we just saw him get like 37 or whatever in Montreal. Like, we know that he can apparently do much worse. Like, I think that, like, when I've looked back at how my projections have done, it's just amazing to see how different, like how much the variance is at the end of the season. I think the gap on average is around like 10 points on either side, where that's like your best or worst case scenario. So that's the way I look at ceiling and floor. Like, if I see, like, most of my projections are pretty conservative, and it's built around the idea that there's a 10-point cushion on either side where I guess the players could fall.
Yeah, I think that we'll see that when we get into the projections that we disagreed on that I wanted to talk about. Most of them are ones where we were higher than you. And it's interesting that you say how you don't actually take into account the team situation. So it'll be really interesting to discuss that and see how you like decide or justify, I guess, not thinking about that. And you still end up doing pretty well. So it's very interesting. But maybe first let's continue talking about this trade. Oh, Brian wants to jump in.
I'm also going to just jump in and say, like, you don't take team situation in, but you do take in, you said minutes, right?
Yeah.
And I don't know. I don't see Pacioretty's. He was already playing on like the second line in Montreal last year. So I feel like his minutes don't even like, you don't really have to do much.
I didn't change anything. Like, I was up last night when the trade broke, and I'm like, great, I got to update things now. And the only thing that really changed was, I guess, like, because I have plus minus projections this year against my better judgment. And that changed because he's on a better team now. But the only big changes were that I downgraded Erik Haula significantly, because I figure he's no longer on that second line left wing, and he might not get as much power play time now either. So he looked like a guy who would be a good sleeper, and now I'd probably just maybe pick him in the last round if I was really feeling optimistic about him.
At all, yeah. And now, if you want to be optimistic, hope that this 1A 1B power play situation holds up. But that's frustratingly, that's one of the things we'll have to wait for like the first few games of the season to know if it's happening.
Yeah. Okay. So let's talk about some of these other players. So yeah, Haula, already we were worried about him because maybe he was even just going to be the third line center or something. Now he's doesn't even have a chance to be the second line left winger or the second line center. So yeah, he's done for fantasy relevance next year, I think, in most formats. We got to talk about Thomas Tatar. He goes to Montreal. It seemed like he was kind of down and out on Vegas, but at the same time, I would have assumed he was going to get a shot on the second line playing with Stastny. So could have potentially been a good situation for him if he would have been able to hold on to it. Now he goes to Montreal, where I guess he might get the Pacioretty treatment. Like, maybe he gets to play with Dano and Shaw. But also, I feel like maybe there's an opening for him on that top power play, because you look at who Montreal has. There's the obvious guys, Gallagher, Drouin, and Max Domi, I guess. And it was going to be Pacioretty as the fourth forward there. At least that's what I would have guessed. Now, like, who is the fourth best forward on Montreal? Is it Thomas Tatar? Like, is he the one that we should be assuming is the front runner to get on that top power play?
It very well might be. I think I was scrolling through Twitter and I saw a lot of people suggest he could fit there, and the other candidate is probably Charles Hudon, but it's really bleak. And if you're hoping for content or for players to fill a role on the Montreal top power play, I feel like you just don't bother.
Yeah, well, and with Jeff Petrie, I mean, Jeff Petrie's capable on the point, but he's not quite Shea Weber. So even until Shea Weber gets back into the lineup, it even looks a little bleaker. Although, Elon, you might not like that take from me.
No, I don't know. I mean, but it was something we were kind of saying to people, like a little sneaky pick, like pick up Jeff Petrie because he was really good last year when he took over on the top power play. But now, yeah, another piece gone in Pacioretty. Maybe Suzuki will be great one day, but you can't imagine next year, even if he does make the team, like how much of an impact can he really make? Anyone else, Brian, that you want to discuss that like gains or loses? What did we decide for Tatar anyways? I guess it's sort of like could be good, could be bad. We don't know. Seems like it's the same for like Paul Stastny. Like I feel like it could be good because he gets this awesome left winger, could be bad because he probably gets bumped from the top power play. I guess you could actually say the same for Alex Tuch. So like I feel like with a lot of these players, it's hard to know whether they benefit or lose. Maybe the biggest loser is Jonathan Drouin, who guaranteed now won't be able to play with Max Pacioretty on the power play or at even strength if he was going to get any time with him. So I can't imagine that's good for him. But Brian, do you have any other players that you have a definitive take, or Dom? I guess Brian, you want to go first?
Well, I don't know. I guess I'll ask now and then continue through. Dom, I'd like to know your take on Lehkonen versus Tatar. Lehkonen is like everybody's favorite hockey hipster pick. It's like, oh yeah, I think he can break out. That was last year, and the opportunity didn't necessarily really arise, but it still looked like there's a chance. Like he's still young, 22 years old, so there's a chance he can still improve into something, and I'm open to it. But now with Tatar, definitely above him in the depth chart. You know, maybe Lehkonen can flip over to right wing, or Tatar can flip over to right wing, but that does essentially still leave Lehkonen blocked out of the top power play unit if the Habs do stack it. And then it's good news for Paul Stastny, who now has Max Pacioretty to play with instead of Thomas Tatar. Like that's a great person to be setting up, and Stastny is very well capable of it. And Alex Tuch too. I think this is good news for him. Again, we go back to the power play situation. If they do go with a 1A, 1B, we don't need to worry about him squeezing on to the top unit. I think he can be a solid power play point producer, especially when he's surrounded by Marchessault, Carlson, Smith, and whichever defenseman they end up playing on that top unit.
Yeah, definitely. With Lehkonen, I think he probably falls into the Charles Hudon category, where they both took a lot of shots last year. They both got a lot of scoring chances relative to the amount of minutes they got, and they just could not score. So maybe that's a Montreal system thing. Maybe that's something they have to be better at. But when you have a guy getting that many chances, he's worth keeping an eye on. But for now, I don't think he's relevant yet unless he gets that top power play spot.
Right. Okay, cool. Well, so that's the Habs trade talk, or I guess you should maybe more call it the Vegas trade talk for today. But, we didn't have oh, sorry, there was like a big movement over there. I'll just repeat. Okay. All right, well, that's good, I think, for our Vegas Habs trade talk. We didn't have too much time to prepare for this. We had to go to work. Brian, you were at Rosh Hashanah dinner just before, so maybe we'll get to this a little bit more later on in the preseason. But Dom, let's get to your projections sheet. So you've already kind of hinted at this. Was the big revelation for me when we did our interview a year ago, pretty much, was that you don't actually do anything yourself, like manually, in terms of using your brain to come up with what numbers. You just have a model. Obviously, you do a lot of work to set up the model and get it to work the way you want. And I guess you said that you put in maybe ideas of how much ice time they will have, but you kind of let the model do the decisioning, and then you kind of like just stick with the number, even if your gut tells you that it's not right.
When I'm personally drafting, like I will make some gut decisions. Like this year, like I'm in a keeper league, and this year my keepers were kind of old. I had Kessel, Malkin, Ovechkin, and I wanted to get younger, so I traded Malkin for Barzil and picks. And then at the draft, I just targeted as many guys under 23 as possible to just hopefully get someone that can break out. And there were guys that my model identified that could if they got the requisite minutes. So guys like Alex DeBrincat, Braden Point, and Ryan Pulock were my three biggest targets, and I got them all. So that was good. So we'll see how that goes for me this year. But yeah, my projections are basically all just what they did in the last 3 years, weighted by recency, age adjusted on a per minute basis. And then I make a judgment call on how many minutes I expect them to get based on where they fit on the depth chart this year and where they were last year and the difference between those two. And then I have to as well adjust for power play time, which is the trickiest part of any projection because you really just don't know who's on the power play at this point.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. So that's the one part where you get to sort of be like, oh, is Tatar going to get on the top power play or not with Montreal? But yeah, man, I kind of wish now, because Brian and I did this audio almanac where we were trying to come up with projections and we like looked at a lot of data, but in the end, we sort of ran the data through our guts to come up with a number that kind of felt right for each of us. And I feel like we should have coordinated. It would have been nice if we would have had what your model spat out to use as our baseline and then just decide if we want to go higher or lower than Dom. Though I actually look, and we actually pretty much agreed on things. Like I feel like by looking at this, I feel pretty good about our projections because I know we're kind of close to you, or maybe that just means that we're just not taking big swings and going mostly with what's happened recently. But of the 282 projections we made, all but 23 of them were within 10 points. So maybe you could say 10 points is actually a big difference. But I think it'll be fun to talk about those few ones where we disagreed on. But overall, like such a useful tool. By the way, I've made a link, keepingkarlsson.com/Dom. Will take you to go and download Dom's projections. And like I said, like Dom, maybe do you want to explain quickly, like beyond just the projections themselves, like this spreadsheet? I could go and sell it for you because I really love it, but I don't know if you want to say stuff about it.
Basically, it just was an idea that came to my head when I started doing fantasy football drafts because I don't know much about football other than watch. Like I don't know who's good. I don't know who's coming up, but I would just look at things online. There's all these projections, and then I stumbled on something called value-based drafting, which is a way to separate positional value based on scarcity of, I guess, how many value players are at each position. That's something that's important in hockey when you separate center, left wing, and right wing. When you have defensemen and goalies to draft, how early do you take a defenseman even though you know they don't get as many points as a forward? So that's the heart of the spreadsheet is I created a VORP type thing where I basically measure that value over replacement forward at that position, and then the rankings customize based on their value over replacement, and it all auto updates based on what your league settings are, what categories you use, whether you use points or category league, and it helps because hockey's not standard. Like you'll have the Yahoo standard leagues or whatever, but not everyone uses that. Like every league is different, and so you can look at all the rankings you want. They are not going to help you as much as something that's tailored specifically to you.
Yeah, so Dom, you mentioned first value-based drafting is like the shortest way to say what we try and encapsulate a lot when we're talking about drafting strategies, as we did on our most recent show too, when you're talking about which position, like should I draft the best player available or draft based on position because of the depth of similar players likely to be available in my next turn and my next draft pick opportunity. So value-based drafting helps you make those calls. And you dropped VORP and then you said value over replacement, but I just want to connect that dot for anyone listening. And like VORP is a very handy acronym, saves you a lot of typing, value over replacement. And it's a good way to really figure out, hey, should I draft this high-end 70-point center, even though there's 7 of them available in the pool, or should I be drafting this 63-point right winger because after him, it's all guys below 60 points?
Yeah, that's basically it. And I think for a lot of people, the biggest thing will be the value of defensemen because most leagues you'll need 4 of them and only 2 at each forward position, and there are just not that many defensemen who can score, especially with most teams going to 4 forwards, 1 defenseman on the power play. That leaves about 30 guys who are on the top power play.
Yeah, that makes a ton of sense. And I've always loved the idea of drafting defensemen early just for that reason. At the end of the draft, while everyone is fighting over the scraps of like who's going to get Alex Goligoski or whatever, I could then go and grab some pretty decent looking forwards. Maybe like a Paul Stasny at that point is still available while everyone else is going for crappy defensemen because everyone already filled up their centers. So yeah, I love, and the nice thing about your spreadsheet, and I don't just mean this as like an infomercial for your spreadsheet, but I actually found it really interesting to learn about this strategy, like really like put it into numbers in my head is like the way, because the nice thing is you could exactly see how everything is calculated. So like you literally just look at who's the 100th best center compared to the center we're looking at, and then see, what's the difference. Then you do the same thing for all the positions. And you really get a clear number value of how much better this player that you're looking at is over the best replacement level guy based on some settings that you set at the beginning. So it's very cool. So very handy tool. Even if you hate Dom's projections, you hate his idea of looking at the last 3 years, like you have to look only at the last year. Like that's fine. You could download the spreadsheet, put in your own numbers and still use the tool. So, okay. With that, again, keepingkarlsson.com/Dom. Okay. Got to put out, you came all this way to come join us virtually. At least I know you want to be watching Monday Night Football, but instead you're talking fantasy hockey with us, so we appreciate it.
It's okay. It's just the Jets Lions right now. That's not important.
Yeah, who cares? I totally know about all that stuff. How did
the Winnipeg Jets and the BC Lions, right?
How did the Packers do yesterday?
Oh man, it was an unreal game. Rodgers got injured early, and the Bears were looking like they were actually good. And then Rodgers came back and destroyed all their hopes and dreams. And one of my good friends is a Bears fan, and I was watching with him, and the range of emotions was incredible to witness.
Can I make a football reference? Because I think this is like one opportunity where I actually can.
Doug Flutie?
I wish I could. We'll work that into an episode title, maybe. No, but I saw Browns fans celebrating after their team won in overtime after going winless last season. I feel like that's going to be like any Ottawa or Montreal fans this year.
Hey, don't discount Vancouver. They could also be in the party of teams with
they could also be very excited about their team winning what will turn out to be a meaningless game.
Yeah, also Detroit. Like you got to be inclusive with all of these terrible-looking teams.
Those organizations are not quite as in the dumps as Ottawa and Montreal.
Sure. Okay, so Dom, what I'd like to go to now is really focus in and make it seem like make a mountain out of a molehill here and like discuss all the players that we actually did disagree on by a lot. And I think the interesting thing is that we don't actually disagree. It's just your model. So it'll be interesting to get your opinion of whether you agree with your model for these players or if you more agree with Brian and my gut of how we think these guys will go. And I wanted to start with Brent Burns, who your model has all the way down with a measly 61 points, which I guess makes sense because last year he did have a bit of a down year overall compared to the near point per game numbers he was putting up for the couple years previous, or at least 70 plus. But like what we pointed out in our almanac was that Brent Burns just had a terrible start to the season. A lot of San Jose just wasn't able to score. Like also Joe Pavelski wasn't doing anything at the start. And then once you take out like the first couple months of the year, Burns was basically like a point per game guy all the way through, was like leading all the league in shots, I think, except for Ovechkin after that stretch of the first like 15, 20 or so games. So Brian and I both ended up assuming that we could just throw that first couple of months into the garbage and project Burns for a much healthier 70 or 75 points. I had 75, Brian had 70. You're way down at 61. Which of those numbers do you think is the more likely scenario for Burns next year?
I'm going to say straight up right now, you never throw anything in the garbage. There's only one time where I've thought you need to throw it in the garbage, and that was Sidney Crosby under what's his face? I don't remember. Mike Johnston, I think that was the coach, and like he just looked awful, and that affected my model for a while because that was obviously not Sid. That's the only time I ever said throw that in the trash. We don't need it. For Burns, like there's two things that are suppressing his projection. Number one is just all defensemen are regressed to the mean more heavily in forwards because there's a bit more uncertainty projecting points for defensemen. And the second thing with Burns is that he is old. I'm pretty sure he's in his low 30s, maybe 32 or 33, something like that.
He was 33 last year.
So he's obviously an elite scorer, and those players tend to age a little better, but I think it's better to be on the safe side, and there is a chance that he falls apart, and last year was a sign that he's not the point per game player we thought he was a couple of years ago, and he's on his way down. So that's why 61 is a bit more conservative, and I definitely can see him hitting 70 or 75. It's just I can also see him hitting 50 if things keep going downwards.
Yeah, I just don't know that San Jose is bad enough for Brent Burns to only get 50 points. I feel like you could throw a lot of power play quarterbacks just onto the Sharks, and they'll be able to handle grabbing 50 points with the sort of deployment that Brent Burns gets. I know you're saying floor, so I'm not going to blow that up too much.
That's like everything going completely wrong. Joe Thornton's knee just explodes. Joe Pavelski,
it explodes.
He flies in the sun. I don't know. Everything goes wrong, and Burns can be a 50-point defender.
That would be terrible if Joe Pavelski flew into the sun. That'd be really bad news for San Jose's season. When you say you regress all defensemen like harder to the mean, so you mean to say that you push them all closer to what averages would be reasonable for a defenseman rather than that particular defenseman? So say like a high percentage defensive shooter or goal converter, like say Ryan Ellis, who can shoot, around 8 or 9%, gets regressed down further away from his own personal percentages and more likely closer to what an average NHL defenseman would have. Did that make sense?
It does, but it's not exactly the way I do things. I know some other models you would project shots and then shooting percentage. I just project goals based on past goals, and I feel that works a little easier for me. So with Burns, it's just a matter of projecting his points based on the last few years, age adjusting, and then regressing based on how well predicted points in the past 3 years. When I looked at the last 10, and I think it said to regress by around 20 or 25%. So.
Okay. Yeah, it seems to me like what, Brian, I think that what you're getting at when you're saying that you regress defensemen more is just like you make age affect defensemen more than you make age affect forwards. That's what you're saying, right?
No, not age. Age affects everyone the same, which might be wrong. It could be wrong, but I just mean that if a player gets 65 points and he's a forward, he might be regressed down just to 60. But if you're a defenseman, you regress down to maybe 57.
Okay. Now we got it. 100%. Ready for the test. Let's talk about another defenseman and see if we can apply this knowledge. Another guy we disagreed on is Torrey Krug. I do want to say about Brent Burns, I think you guys are wrong. Like, I think that Brent Burns is going to get like 75.
Wait a second. Wait, I know. I projected up there. Well, you projected Elon 70 points. I went like mid to high 60s, which rounded to 70, which is how we did our almanac. We rounded numbers. Like Brent Burns had 84 shots going into his 21st game of the season on November 24th. So like almost 2 months and no goals for Brent Burns, which is like weird, right? And you could, I guess you could suggest that the quality of his shots and the expected goals that he had coming out of those shots wasn't necessarily as high, but I feel like the way he scored throughout the rest of the season was pretty much in line with what he'd been doing. But of course, age is a concern. This will be his age 33 season. Yeah. He'll turn age 34 in March.
That's exactly why defensemen need to be regressed more, because they take shots from farther out. Their shots going in are more prone to luck. So even a guy who scored so many goals like Burns can hit those dry spells, even if he's taking all these shots, because the shots just aren't as good as a shot taken from a forward.
Okay, so now let's try to go to Torrey Krug here. So Brian and I both had him down for 60 points next year. After he had a great year last year, he ended up with 59 points in 76 games. So it's a 64-point pace. So if anything, we were being conservative putting him at 60 until you look at Dom's spreadsheet and you have him down at less than 50 points. So what makes you think that your spreadsheet, or no, let me say that again. What makes you think? Sounds so accusatory. What? Sorry. What do you think is the reason why your model pushed Krug to fall so much?
Krug is an interesting one, because when I was advertising my spreadsheet and, hawking it on the old twitter.com, I put the top scorers and then I did top defensemen. And then the first few mentions were, where's Torrey Krug? And I'm like, did I forget Torrey Krug? He should be here. And then I looked and he was just off the list at like 47. I'm like, that's probably wrong. And I'm like, how much did he get last year? And I think it was like 58 or something. And you said 64-point pace. And I'm like, I genuinely don't know what happened there. I'm pretty sure it is just a regression thing. And because he was injured last year, didn't get in as many games, he gets pushed further because the sample size in the last 3 years is smaller. I'm guessing those are things contributing to it. He also doesn't get as many minutes as some of the other big point producing defenseman.
Yeah. So that's one thing that's held him back. Like he gets 200 or 300 fewer minutes than a lot of guys who are scoring at similar rates as him. So he doesn't actually have the opportunity to score quite as many points, but he is like at even strength. He's a top 10 offensive defenseman if you look at just his rate stats. But of course, he's 27 years old. There's Zdeno Chara and Charlie McAvoy. Like they don't need Torrey Krug to be a workhorse. So he's not going to get to be one, which is why we like him to hold steady. But we love Torrey Krug, so I'm relieved to hear that you looked at that and scratched your head.
Yeah, I like Torrey Krug. Especially since he gets a lot of shots as well, that makes him valuable. I'm not 100% sure what happened there, and I looked into it. I'm like, I guess this is what it says. I can lie to you and say, yeah, Charlie McAvoy is going to eat into his power play time, but that's not what happened. I'm pretty sure I had him at the same power play minutes that he got in the last 3 years, and I think it's just regression, being a little aggressive for a defenseman.
Okay, well that's reasonable and interesting to know like what you think might have gone into it. I know Brian's always like super reticent to like consider that this like new hot young defenseman might eat into the power play time. Like I know Brian, like you don't seem concerned at all about Provorov potentially bumping Ghost Bear because Ghost Bear's been so good. And I think same with Torrey Krug and Charlie McAvoy. Are you of the same mind, Dom? Like very unlikely that McAvoy or someone like Provorov could like usurp. Even Brian, you're like not so certain that Rasmus Dahlin, or I think you sort of backed off on that a little bit, but like that Dahlin could steal the power play job from Ristolainen at least in the first season. Dom, what's your take on these young defensemen and like when they have a for sure top power play defenseman ahead of them, but the young one seems like they have a lot of promise? Like how concerned are you that they're going to take over?
I'm really lucky to be working at The Athletic with the way they've expanded, where there's now a beat writer in almost every market. And for my season previews, I wanted to get a sense of the depth chart. And I literally talked to everyone and said, what do you think this is going to look like? And if there were questions about the power play, then I asked about them. And of course, when I had my own fantasy draft, I mentioned that to my friends, and they're like, that seems unfair. I'm like, this is my job. I don't care if it's unfair. But for those specific cases, they didn't make any inklings that anything like that would happen. The only player who I was told could steal a power play job was Ryan Pulock on the Islanders, which is why I targeted him in my own league. And that's because Nick Leddy wasn't as great last year, I think, and Pulock has that howitzer shot. But for Dahlin, I think the Sabres might even go 3-2 and put him there, but I don't think he would usurp Ristolainen in a 4-1. McAvoy, I just think Krug is just too good there that they're fine.
Yeah, like Krug is bombing it, and Charlie McAvoy is not even really like on 100 shot paces. So you've got them both offering two very different things. One guy you want on the power play is the one shooting it, of course. Although the Golden Knights have Shea Theodore, who's he's better than Charlie McAvoy offensively, or at least in his numbers, what he's shown. But there's sort of an analog between Colin Miller to Shea Theodore and Torrey Krug to Charlie McAvoy, but also not at all. That's a terrible analogy. It's just like one guy is known for like running the show, and Colin Miller and Torrey Krug are just letting it fly from the blue line, and the other two I think are less inclined to be shooting.
Okay. I think that maybe Charlie McAvoy might I think that the Charlie McAvoy fans might not like it that you said that Shea Theodore is known to be like so much better offensively. But I mean, I guess we'll let time tell. They're still pretty young. Let's go now to forward, a superstar forward that we disagreed on in Johnny Gaudreau. So Brian and I both just were expecting the good times to keep on rolling with Gaudreau. Like last year, he had, I believe it was a point per game pace. I got it up here. He had 60 points. Or no, what am I looking at here? Whatever, 84 points in 80 games. That's it. 60 assists. He had 24 goals, 60 assists, 84 points in 80 games. That's an 86-point pace. Brian and I were both thinking he'll just keep on doing it, get up to 90-point pace next year. But Dom, you have him falling a bit from that point per game pace, or above a point per game pace, down to a little bit below 80 points. Is there a reason that you think? Is it just because Gaudreau only got there last year? Before that, he was closer to like a 75-point guy?
I think the year before he was even lower than that, wasn't he? I think he was in the 60s. I might be mistaken.
Oh, I'll look that up.
But that's basically it. You, with a guy like Gaudreau, because I didn't notice that as well, that a lot of people had him high and I was under point per game for him. And it always comes back to floors and ceilings. And with Gaudreau, we saw his floor 2 years ago, and we saw either what you should expect from him last year or his ceiling. You can't be certain about what you saw, so we just be safe and project under 78 points. And if he gets to 88, that's cool. If he gets to 68, then we know that 78 is closer, or point per game was closer to his ceiling and not his actual true talent level.
Yeah, so Gaudreau's numbers over the course of his career, 64 in his first year, then 78, then 61, then 84. So it's like guaranteed to be in the mid-60s if that pattern continues. But I don't think it will. I think I feel a little more confident in Gaudreau. Like if you look at his last 3 seasons, so 2 of those were good, and then there was the one down year sandwich in between. He's 13th amongst all skaters in the NHL in points scored. Actually, that goes back to 2014, 13th amongst all skaters in points scored. And last year was the first time where we saw him actually kick up some of his rate stats, like his percentage of shot share while he was on the ice went up, shot attempts per 60 went up, points per 60 went up. And that was really the first time it's happened. So I got kind of excited about that. And he also only scored 3 times on 56 power play shots. So I saw that as another place where he can probably, at least like if he's going to regress in other places, that'll help balance the scale a little bit and hold him to where he is. So 90 points was definitely a swing. Like that's a hopeful moment for me. But I still feel like super confident that he'll get 80 until, of course, I saw your projections.
I absolutely would not be surprised if Gaudreau hit 90. Like just watching him, he has the talent to go through literally everyone on the ice if he wanted to. It's just the fact that we saw that he hit 61 just 2 years ago, and we know that his floor does exist and he can be that low. So it's a little.
But even if he's young, right?
Yeah,
like
he is young. Yeah,
he is 25. So if we're looking at what he did in his rookie or sophomore season, although it was his 3rd year, but like as someone, do you cut someone any more slack when they're at such a low number and they're just in the beginning stages of their aging curve?
It's always tricky for players who are just coming on, especially if they don't have a full 3 years to go by. But with Gaudreau, this is going to be his 5th year, so there is data for him. He's not as young as someone else who's in breaking out, because I think he started his NHL career at age 22 or something like that. But at the same time, there's also the team effects where he'll have a talented right winger finally to play with, whether that's Elias Lindholm or James Neal. There'll be someone there that could boost him up. And even if you are conservative like I am, there's still the fact that the entire left wing position is incredibly scarce this year, and he's one of the few that can really light it up. So it might be worth it just to reach and hope for that 90-point season, because he obviously has the talent to fulfill it.
Yeah, I agree with you. And I think one other point in favor of Gaudreau is the fact that he's always had a third piece on that top line that's not been that great. You know, Gaudreau, Monahan, and someone like last year, Furland was there for a lot of the time. Now they signed James Neal. If James Neal doesn't work out, they could play Elias Lindholm there. Maybe Matthew Tkachuk gets up there. Like, I feel like he's going to have better line mates this year, and also better people on the power play than he used to, though he does lose Hamilton. But I don't know. I think overall it's looking good for him. But so I think the interesting comparable is you talk about Gaudreau being able to like skate around everyone. Another guy who people talk about like that is Matt Barzil, who's one of the rare players where you actually have higher than Brian and I both did. So you had him down at 85 points. So a whole almost 10 points, 8 points more than Johnny Gaudreau. I feel like, I mean, obviously in a draft, it's a whole different thing. Because like you said, Gaudreau's a left winger and Barzil's a center. So you might, even if you did agree with those projections, you would still probably take Gaudreau earlier. By the way, Brian, you said Gaudreau at one point, and I know that Daniel Negreanu would tweet at us if I didn't correct it. So that's for you, that correction. So yeah, how, like, do you believe that Barzil's 85 points? Like, he did it last year, so I guess that's why you're projecting it. At the same time, now Tavares is gone. Like, we've had this conversation so many times about what do the changes on the Islanders, what will they mean for someone like Barzil, who had such an amazing rookie season? So what do you think about this 85-point projection? Brian and I had him a lot lower. Well, not a lot lower. We both had him around 75 points.
Barzil's a tricky one. Obviously, I like him a lot, enough to target him myself in my own league and give up Malkin for him. But the thing is that when I was doing my research for my Islanders preview, I was looking into Barzil, and there are not many players who have done what he did under the age of 20. like I think he had 84, 85 points last year, and the amount of players who have done that in the salary cap era is I think like 7, and it was like Crosby, Ovechkin, Malkin, Stamkos, Austin Matthews, and Connor McDavid. So not even John Tavares himself was able to do what Barzil did.
Not even God himself.
Not even Pajama Boy himself could do what Barzil did in his first season. So I think that's reason enough to be optimistic and think maybe he can keep that up. I wouldn't be surprised if regression did come, but he's also at an age where he's only going to get better. The only issue with him is how much should we discount quality of competition? He's going to be the guy on the Islanders. Can he handle the heat? Because he doesn't have Tavares in front of him, and I think he has the talent to do that, but he'll be a very interesting test case this year to see how much quality of competition matters when it comes to projecting points. Maybe 85 is too high. Maybe he should be closer to 80 because it just seems like that would put his range at 75 to 95, and I'm not sure I see a 90-point season. But there's just the amount of players who have done what he's done is so small that I'm just really confident that he can keep it up.
Yeah, I'll clarify your point, and it's one that everyone should really realize. 4 players in the salary cap era have been rookie point per game rookies playing at least 65 games, and you've got Ovechkin, Crosby, Malkin, and Barzil. So it's elite company he's in. The reason I put him down is I just feel like there needs to be an Islanders tax on anyone in Long Island at the moment with the way their offseason has gone. Like I can't totally, like Barzil, I feel can overcome a lot of whatever quality of competition extras he needs to face this season, but I don't know if he can overcome the rest of the franchise being run in a bit of a loony way. Maybe that's overly punitive for just not trusting in a front office.
Well, hey, I mean, he has to have good players to play with, right? I think it's going to be so interesting to see who's going to get those lines. That's one of the teams where I'm most curious to see how the lines are going to shake out, because last year there was that whole Beauvillier, Barzil, Eberle line that did really well at the end of the year. But at the same time, then what happens to Anders Lee and what happens to Josh Bailey? Like, I feel like all these guys are going to be affected by whether or not they're playing with Barzil and for how long. Oh, okay. Sorry.
Next player.
I guess I'll just go to the next player.
Yeah, you've got to plan, Elon, to get through the rest of these guys.
Go as fast as we can. We'll get as many as we can, man.
Okay. Yeah, let's do it.
Okay. Next, let's go actually to a team where Dom definitely applied a big tax compared to our opinions, because there's 3 Buffalo players that we like agreed upon, and they're all like top guys worth discussing in like Sam Reinhart, Casey Middlestat, and Kyle Okposo. So for all 3 of them, we were about 10 points higher. So I wonder overall, like I'm kind of optimistic about Buffalo. Like they've got Dahlin now. They've brought in Jeff Skinner. Jack Eichel is hopefully healthy and a year older. So I feel like everyone is looking really good. I was even excited about Kyle Okposo potentially having a bounce back just because, last year he was going through all those injuries. And I know that your model is not going to take that into account. You're not going to give him credit or, give him a free pass for last year's sad point total because he was injured. Like your model doesn't take that into account. So I think that makes sense. But I'm still curious to know, like Sam Reinhart also, he started to really break out last year and he's playing with Eichel. That's probably going to stick for next year on the top line and on the top power play. So Dom, what do you think about these Sabres guys? Are you happy with what your model spat out for them? Or do you think that maybe it's a bit too low?
I used to really be like Kyle Okposo, but I didn't even think about him this year. He was not even on my radar. I don't even care what his point projection was or how the difference was. I just don't think he's fantasy relevant until he proves otherwise this season. And that goes hand in hand with the other person that I was low on, which is Casey Middlestat. And that's simply because rookies are difficult to project, and I use mostly NHL equivalencies. And Casey Middlestat surprisingly had a very low NHL compared to the hype surrounding him. And if there are player point total over-unders, I'm smashing the under on Middlestat because I think he's just a bit overhyped and he might be in over his head in his first season. I could be wrong. I think I have some goodwill with the Sabres fan base because I projected their team for 86 points because I am optimistic. I'm a little skeptical about Middlestat based on what he did in college last year. Sorry, go ahead.
Yeah, no. So with rookies, I am like literally through our almanac. I'm like, I don't know how to project rookies. I gauge the hype and I gauge the sources of the hype, and then I translate that into a number. And I do look at who in college has had similar paths. So for Middlestat, I guess the names that I came out with were guys like Kyle Connor, JT Compher, Tyler Motte, I always get that wrong, Zach Werenski, Zach Hyman, Dylan Larkin, Ryan Dzingel. So it's a real mixed bag. So does your model take into account certain college, like how a player performs in college, or is that you making those numbers work because your model only works with NHL numbers?
It's basically using NHLE and then looking at other sources to see what they say, and if they deserve a bump up like Middlestat did, then they deserve a bump up. Because I think 2 years ago when I first released these projections, I only used NHLE, and I got burned for how low Line A was because Finnish NHLE was comically low, and he didn't do that well there by that, and then he exploded for however many points he got. And maybe Middlestat's the same, where he's much better in the NHL than he was in the NCAA. And he obviously had that 6-game tryout last year where he looked good, which is something I did factor into his projection. So I think I used a combination of his NHL and NCAA numbers. But I'd just still be worried based on what he did in college.
And just to clarify, Elon, before you take us, or before Dom, Elon, you'll direct us where to go. But NHLE is an NHL equivalence rating that sort of quantifies what an analogous NHL production would be for whatever league the player is playing in. So the value of 50 points in college, the NHLE will give you the commensurate production that would be worth in the NHL. It's not like a translation, but it's just sort of a value comparison.
Yeah, that's basically it.
Okay, so Dom, you were about to talk about Sam Reinhart.
I was, yeah. I love Reinhart. My roommate's in my fantasy hockey league, and she took Reinhart in the second round of our keeper pool, and I was hoping to get him like round 4 or 5 as one of my targets in that under 23 range because I was trying to get younger. And she took him so early. I'm like, why? He's not supposed to go this early. And I just think that if Eichel really breaks out and has a point per game season or higher, then I think Reinhart will be along for the ride. And we saw that last year in the second half when he, I think, was on a 70-point pace or higher from January onward. And if Buffalo starts hot, I think it'll be because of those two. And I would not be surprised with a big breakout from Reinhart. It's not something that I'm able to personally forecast based on his past history.
Yeah, that makes sense. It's the same with like someone like Middlestat. Like you talk about how he did in college and all of that, but a lot of it's going to depend on, the opportunity that he gets. Same with Reinhart. Same with, I think, Kyle Okposo, who I think he might be a little bit of a sleeper just for me. Then apparently you disagree. I still think he has something in him. If he could get on that top power play, it might be Okposo versus Middlestat fighting for that last spot to play with. Especially if you say there's going to be 2 defensemen on the top power play.
They'll probably just have that first line. They might have Skinner, Eichel, Reinhart, and if they have 2 defensemen, then those 2 guys are on the outside. So it'll depend on if they want Dahlin on there or if they use that for a forward, and that's Okposo or Pominville or Middlestat, I guess.
Yeah, that's very interesting. Yeah, I didn't consider the potential of the 2 defensemen. I liked my little analogy I had at one point that I thought Middlestat is like the Barzil. Last year there was Eichel.
No.
All right,
they're not even the same stratosphere. I know a lot of Buffalo fans are like really hoping for that. And if Middlestat is anywhere close to 70 points, I will come back on this podcast and apologize to everyone in Buffalo personally because I just do not see it.
Yeah, I definitely said that more just because of the players around him. I just had fun with the analogy. I was like saying that I think that Jeff Skinner is the Anders Lee, and I think that, I just sort of like went through the list there, like Pulak and
Okposo is the Eberle, which isn't true. But like it was a very fun analogy. And Elon, you said you never heard anyone suggest the 3 forward 2 defense possibility. Yours truly considered it back in like June. How about that? But it feels like for me that was just like throwing it like out into the stratosphere and seeing if it stuck. But now that Dom said it, it's got weight.
Right, wow. Am I supposed to give you credit because you thought this thing in June and didn't share it on the podcast?
No, I did. I mean, if I only thought it, I wouldn't be like crediting myself for it. I said it. Check the tapes.
Okay. Let's go to the next player. So, okay, one crazy and one that's actually worth talking about. So, on Edmonton, Brian and I just went nuts with Connor McDavid because why not? I feel like it doesn't even matter what you project for Connor McDavid because obviously you should pick him as the top player. So, whether you say 200 points or 150 points or like, what does it matter? So, Brian and I both ended up with like 126 or 125, I think.
It was to be above Joe Thornton's best mark in the salary cap era. We just figured, why not? Why not put McDavid one above that?
But I think the more interesting guy to talk about is Oscar Klefbom, who last year I thought was like going to be a really smart pick. You know, the guy leading the top power play from the defense, playing with McDavid, who we knew was going to be so good. And Klefbom was like just a total bust, even though he took a lot of shots, but hardly any points. Now we go into next year, and obviously your model is going to have Klefbom low. But at the same time, I don't know, you have him at 35 points, and Brian and I both put him closer to 45 points. And I feel like there's even upside for him, but I don't want to go too crazy because last year we really burned a lot of people probably by suggesting they get Klefbom. But what do you think about Klefbom for next year? Does he have competition to be the top guy in Edmonton?
There actually may be some competition. I heard from Jonathan Willis that there is a slight chance that with Sekera out, Evan Bouchard might be the guy to make the team out of camp, at least on a tryout basis. And he has the talent as a power play QB to just completely steal that spot from Klefbom, who is more of a shooter than a QB. But that's obviously like a very, very low chance. And maybe that happens and he looked like a genius picking up right away. But I wouldn't put my money on that happening personally because Bouchard is just still so raw despite being a top 10 pick. Klefbom, I do like to draft this year because he should still be on that top power play and because his peripheral stats are still so good. And I just don't think that power play will be as terrible as it was last season. And that's enough to take him as maybe your third or fourth defenseman. I think I have him much higher than whatever his ADP is. So I'm on board, but I don't think 40 points is like, it's reasonable. I just wouldn't expect it. It would probably be like a ceiling for me.
Yeah. Klefbom is someone, like Elon, you said we led people astray with him last year, but we really did believe in him all year. And I think Klefbom's biggest competition, if it's not this prospect who could make the team out of camp, is the Edmonton mainstream media and front office. It seems like no one in Edmonton wants the guy to succeed. They're the ones who will keep him out of that top power play spot and cycle in Boucher and or is it Bouchard?
Bouchard. Yeah, Brian, you're like this prospect.
I got it.
First round, like
I got it. Okay, and cycle in Bouchard, and then when Bouchard doesn't work out, Ethan Bear, and then they'll put in Andre Sekera on crutches. Anyone over Oscar Klefbom seems to be the Edmonton preference.
Mm-hmm. He did have a shoulder injury last year, so that probably hindered things. And I think with full health, he could bounce back this year. I like him as a sleeper candidate, but I took him early last year as well because I also thought he looked good and would anchor that top power play. And now I'm a little gun shy, but I still have faith.
Yeah, I like him to grab later than you were able to last year when you probably had to pick him as your number 1 or number 2 guy. And like you just said, Dom, he could be your number 3 or number 4 guy. And a lot of people have made reference, and especially us, over the offseason about Duncan Keith's poor shooting luck. And I'll just make, like, he had no shots on 137 even strength shot. He had no goals on 137 even strength shots. Klefbom only had 2 goals on 137 even strength shots, which is nearly as unfortunate as Duncan Keith. Like, there's so many reasons to believe Klefbom is better than his numbers showed last year. And the health thing also gives us reason for optimism too, that he's back, he's fully ready and capable.
I do appreciate you bringing up Duncan Keith because I have heard that there isn't a guarantee he's on the top power play, and it may in fact be Eric Gustafsson, which would be a supreme sleeper with your last round pick, just a dart at the wall if this guy can get on the same power play as Patrick Kane and Schmaltz and DeBrincat.
Oh man, Brian, that's gonna kill you in our Chicago chapter, because you were like telling everyone, "Don't worry about Duncan Keith, he's fine," and I was like, "Oh no, he's kind of old."
So long as he's on the top power play, but if he's not, that's big trouble. Like, let's just play a game. Let's do a thought experiment. If Duncan Keith was on the top power play, how would you feel about him? Still 50-point capable?
No.
40, 45, maybe.
Okay.
Maybe.
Right. So maybe I'm the biggest Duncan Keith projector out there.
That dude is old as hell, man. I don't know.
And also, Brian, like, you're like, okay, assuming he's on the top power play. Last year, he wasn't on the top power play for a lot of the year. He got bumped by everyone. And then your only reason to say he's going to be there is because there's no one else. There wasn't anyone else last year. Like, who was Cody Franzen? Who's Jordan Osterley? Like, why not Eric Gustafsson? So I like Dom's opinion. And Brian, I don't know why I'm being a jerk right now. Okay, let's just move on to the next player that I wanted to bring up, which is we're running out of time. There's so many interesting players.
Honestly, if there's players, we can just keep on rolling. The game doesn't start till 10:20. We can just take our time, cool down, keep talking about players. It's fine.
All right, let's take a breath then. So, one thing I did want to say then, if we do have some luxury of time, about Oscar Klefbom is, what I like about Klefbom also, and a lot of the Oilers, is they last year were so bad on the power play, which I feel like you'd expect them not to be like so bad again next year. And also they had the least number of power play opportunities. So if either of those things goes back to somewhat average, that's already a huge improvement. And then you could also hope, like Brian, you were saying that Klefbom didn't score at even strength. So if he could get a few more goals at even strength, that would also help. Plus, he's great for peripherals. He gives you some blocks. He takes a lot of shots. So yeah, a lot of upside. Yeah, you don't need to reach for him. That's the nice thing. Now you could get him as your third, fourth defenseman. But I feel like don't just let him fall too far, because you could get a super cheap, potentially really valuable guy on your fantasy team. Okay, with that, I'll go to the next player. How about Dylan Larkin? He's someone who I think it makes sense that your model's not going to go too crazy over, because he hasn't done it yet. I feel like a lot of people are expecting Larkin to really break out next year as the guy in Detroit. Like, there's no Zetterberg taking time. Like, Larkin didn't even get 50% of his team's power play time. It was like he got a little bit less than 50. Next year, you'd have to assume that Detroit's just going to stack their top power play with whoever they can and have Larkin at the top there. So you have him down for 60 points, Dom. Brian and I were both closer to 70. Are you more confident in you or us?
Well, I actually drafted Larkin in my hunt for under 23 players. He was a target for me, and he's definitely underrated compared to what his ADP is, which is 147, which is stupid. But I think 70 is probably a best case for this season with how much talent is around him. And we saw 2 years ago where he had it was a 2 or 3, I don't know, where he had a bad year. He has a floor that we are aware exists, and it's no guarantee that he can survive playing top minutes. So it's interesting that you guys were lower on Barzil for Tavares leaving, but now with Larkin, you think he will improve despite Zetterberg leaving. So I'm not sure about that specifically from my end. But I think 60 is safe, and I wouldn't be surprised by 70, but I also wouldn't be surprised by 50 either. But the power play thing is a good thing to mention as well, because the way I adjust power play is I look at their percentage of ice time. So for Larkin, that was, I think, 45 or something over the last 3 years, and then I bump that up based on what's expected. So he's probably going to be on the first power play unit this year, so I bump that up to, I think, 55%, but he's not very good on the power play, or hasn't been during his career. So he's going to have to actually figure out how to score there for that bump to really be meaningful. And if he can, then obviously 70 points isn't out of the question, but Detroit doesn't really have much talent to surround him where that power play bump might even work out. Like, they have him, Mantha, Mike Green, I guess, Nyquist. It's going to be a not very good power play, and it's tougher to see him really exploding without figuring that out.
Yeah, I like that you called us on the Barzil Larkin thing, because it is sort of a similar situation where the incumbent longtime franchise cornerstone who attracts a lot of the big attention and has been used to getting the big numbers leaves. Except Zetterberg wasn't quite doing that to the same extent Tavares was. So I think that's one reason that maybe I'm a little more optimistic in Larkin. But it really was an Islanders tax. Not to say Detroit has been the best run organization, but that really was my biggest concern. Like I'm not a huge believer in quality of competition hampering a player's ability to produce. And I'm interested, that you said Larkin hasn't been a great power play guy. And I'm really curious to know, with the deployment that he has to get this year, can he actually make himself into one? Last year, just 1 goal on 27 power play shots, which seems odd. I feel like that's not his actual skill, that he can actually produce better when have regressed percentages that give him 3 or 4 goals on 27 power play shots. But this is the season where we'll get to see.
Yeah, for sure. And it's going to be a year where we see a lot of things about Larkin, what kind of player he really is. And it starts on the power play. I think his power play points per 60 was incredibly low for the past few years. And just circling back to Barzil, because I do remember another thing that was in his favor was last year he only got 18 minutes, and without Tavares, he might hit closer to 20, and that reduces any possible regression that might be in the forecast. So it's probably weird to see a player who got 84 and him projected for 84, 85 again, especially for someone with 1 year. But it was the age and that bump in ice time that helped things. With Larkin, I need to see it to believe it. And I've seen his power play skills not be very good, and that's probably why he wasn't on the first unit to begin with. So this will be a telling year for the kind of player he is, but I think he's worth a gamble, even if he's on a bad team.
Yeah, just for the record, Elon is a little more optimistic on Larkin than I am. Like, I'm in the 65, 70 point range, but probably closer to I would lean towards the 65 end of that. But these are little nuanced bits that aren't that important. Just if Dylan Larkin isn't a superstar next year, I'm just saying blame Elon.
What a suck up, a teacher's pet.
That was for the listeners. It wasn't for Dom. Although I hope Dom likes it too. What?
Say it again.
Although I said that wasn't a suck up. That was for the listeners. Although I hope Dom likes it too.
Yeah, you just want Dom to like you more than he likes me.
Nobody likes me more than they like you.
Yeah, that's my main quality, is I can get people to like me. That's, I think, why my wife sometimes doesn't like me. Like, you're a jerk. Why do people like you so much? But anyway, okay. Who are we going to talk about? Oh, yeah, with Larkin, I also feel like I like the idea that he's going to now get to play with Mantha all the time. Zetterberg, the thing with Tavares, the comparison there is, I feel like Barzil still got really good line mates. Larkin had to maybe sometimes have to be sacrificed. Next year, he's going to get the best of the best. He's going to get the best power play time. So, I don't know. I feel like it's a little different, but lots of good points there. We'll see. And now I wanted to go to a team in Florida, which everyone's so excited about for next year. This top 6 is mouth-wateringly good now that they've brought in Hoffman, and they were already looking so good last year. Yet, we agreed on most of the top 6, but there's 2 players where we disagreed on a little bit, in Evgeny Dadonov and Nick Bjugstad. So Dadonov has only had this 1 year of NHL experience, but in it, he had a great year. He had 65 points in 74 games, which is a 72-point pace. And now, Dom, you actually had him lower going to next year. So I'm curious, what was the reason for you to decrease him down to 61 points when last year he was on an above 70-point pace? Brian and I both pretty much had him landing in the same pace that he had last year.
Well, with the team bringing Hoffman in, I just feel that the first power play will be Barkov, Huberdeau, Trocheck, Hoffman, and Yandel, and that doesn't leave much room for Dadonov, and I reduced his power play minutes based on that. I think his time on ice maybe as well, but those are basically the 2 factors. Is Hoffman comes in, Dadonov will probably see a reduced role, especially on the power play, and that would reduce his output.
So yeah, the reason why I didn't take
Brad, can you start again? Your chair squeaked as you rushed into the microphone.
Oh, okay. Sorry, Dom. Were you done? I
was done.
Okay, good. The reason that I was
Sorry, there's a bit of an internet glitch there as you started. Can you start again?
The reason that I didn't downgrade Dadonov a whole lot while worrying about his power play 1 spot is that last year he only had 13 power play points. So even if he does fall to the second power play unit, maybe he loses 5 points because of that with the man advantage. But if he can keep up his even strength production, which was fantastic, then there's not a whole lot to worry about. So maybe keeping him at a 72-point pace as he was last year is optimistic in what his power play deployment will be. I definitely agree that if the Panthers have Hoffman, he is a premier power play. He is a premier piece to have on your power play. So it would make sense that they try and use him on their top unit or as often as they can. Dadonov's also 29. Like, he's not young, and I feel like a lot of people who might just be familiar, oh, who's this new guy, Evgeny Dadonov? He came from the KHL pretty late in his career. So just keep that in mind. If you're hoping that he's suddenly going to grow and explode into an amazing player, he's 29 years old. So
no, but he was already amazing last year. He doesn't need to grow. If anything, I think another reason to expect more upside for Dadonov. Now I'm just taking the pro Dadonov side in the debate here for fun. He also had that injury midway through, which like really hurt his production. Like afterwards, he went through a stretch of being really cold. A lot of people were even dropping him in their leagues. And I remember suggesting on the podcast, like, no, grab Dadonov now because, he's still playing with Barkov and like magic things are going to happen. And then he ended the season so strong. And I feel like next year, if he could stay healthy all year, I guess, this power play thing is definitely the big consideration. That's another team where it's going to be really interesting to see who gets bumped. Because, Vincent Trocheck also used to not be on the top power play. It was Jonathan Marchessault there a couple years ago. And then it was only with Marchessault leaving that Trocheck got on there. Who knows, maybe he's the one who gets bumped, though he did so well, but so did everyone. That's why it's so interesting. And like we even have the other line mate with Barkov and Nick Bjugstad, who got up to the top line midway through the season and did so well there. And I could understand, Dom, again, like the reason why your model has Bjugstad low makes total sense because it was only a short stretch of the season where he was amazing after being a pretty much non-fantasy relevant guy for the past couple seasons or pretty much his whole career. So do you agree that Bjugstad probably shouldn't be considered too high? You have him for 45 points, or do you feel like him being on the top line, you got to give more credit to that last like half of last season?
It's probably somewhere in between. He has last year was his breakout, so I'd still be cautious that he doesn't revert back to what it was before. But the fact he is probably still playing with Barkov and the fact he succeeded there maybe means you bump him up and consider him. But I'd still be a little worried, especially since he probably won't get much power play time at all, and that makes it's always hard to draft someone who doesn't have that opportunity, especially in leagues that count power play points as extra. So I'm not sold on Bjugstad for that reason, but I mean, he's got a nice spot next to Barkov, so maybe he keeps it up. I'm just not sure.
Yeah. So the one thing that Bjugstad had going for him for the second time in his career was he was shooting at a rate per 60 minutes that would get him 3 shots per game with enough minutes. Like he essentially had the same shooting. Let me try that again. The one thing that Bjugstad had really going for him last year for the second time in his career was some really great shot rates. His shots per 60 were up to where they were back in 14-15 when he had 3 shots per game. Now, he didn't get all the same minutes in 2017-18 so that he could get all the way back up to 3 shots per game. But if he did have the same amount of minutes, he would have because his rate stats were there. So that was one promising thing with Bjugstad. I get why he seems like a guy who could be shuffled around the lineup, though. He has bounced between first, second, and third line for a good chunk of his career. So if you're betting on him, you want to just make sure to take that into account, that his deployment could sink at any moment.
Yeah, and he's very dependent on being with Barkov, and we saw he struggled to perform in a third line role. And if the Panthers decide they want to keep him as the third line center instead of someone like Henrik Borgstrom or one of the 15 other bottom 6 guys they have signed, then Bjugstad's value just completely plummets because it's so teammate dependent. And those are the guys that always worry me because lines change so frequently.
Yeah, that makes sense. Didn't Florida just sign Troy Brouwer?
Mm-hmm.
I wonder if he could get there. Probably not.
Probably. Who knows? Florida's another team where you have to tax any player on it because there is a concern about what front office is actually doing.
I feel like, I don't know if they're the same player at all. They're definitely in different stages of their career, but I see Bjugstad for next year a lot like Travis Konechny, someone who could land on the top, like someone who got on the top line midway through last season and exploded. No chance of getting on the top power play, but playing with, you know, in Konechny's case, playing with Giroux and Couturier, and you know, Bjugstad's place playing with Barkov and Dadonov. Like, it's such a potential for a good spot, but also someone you have to be a little bit nervous about, because what if they get bumped? Like Florida, you talk about all these people in the bottom six. In Philly, you've got, you know, JVR just got signed. Like, he needs to have a spot. So who knows what happens there? So yeah, it's interesting when you have to decide whether to draft these guys that you know for sure won't be on the top power play. Okay, I guess I'll go to a couple more guys, then we can end the show. So we were already talking about Vegas before, so I probably should have just brought him up there. But the next guy, one of the only guys, again, that you are higher on, and I'm sure a lot of people can guess who this is going to be, is William Karlsson on Vegas, because your model, I don't think, takes into account the fact that he had this really high shooting percentage, which was a big reason why Brian just plummeted his point total from last year to next season's projection. You've got William Karlsson at 70 points. Brian had him way down at 55. I was at 60. I wanted to, you know, be a little bit more optimistic. But what do you think about your Karlsson projection in your spreadsheet?
It's definitely concerning because obviously, you know, his shooting percentage is high, and that probably comes down. He's a really tricky person to project this year, not just for the shooting percentage, but because last year was the first time he got power play time. So if you do a projection of just straight points per 60, you land at 60 points for Karlsson. But then you see that that's based on him getting an average of, I think, 26% of minutes on the power play. So bump that up to 55, which is likely if he's a 1A in Vegas, and you double his power play point output, and that gets you the extra 10 points to get to 70. So that's the way my model works and how it got there, but it's just a little concerning based on how fortunate he was last season.
Yeah, one thing that we noticed was his ratio of primary to secondary assists was so lousy. He belonged with guys like Henrik Sedin or I don't know. Sarah, hang on, let me try that again. I have actual names here that I'd like to.
Also,
reference.
You probably don't want to insult someone by saying they're like Henrik Sedin.
Yeah, well, no, that's why I needed to stop.
That's why you need an adjective like old Henrik Sedin.
Oh, well, yes, that's the mistake I made. Okay. Our concern about William Karlsson was that 14 of Karlsson's 21 even strength assists were secondaries, and he had essentially a 1-to-2 primary to secondary assist ratio, which is bad. You want it flipped. You want 2 primaries for every secondary to feel a little more confident that someone is actually deserving of the points that they're racking up. His primary to secondary ratio, we're still talking about William Karlsson, was one of the worst in the league, up there with old Henrik Sedin, guys like Nemesnikov, Andrew Kopp, Timo Meyer, Nick Foligno, one of the Ritchie brothers, Cody Eakin, Johan Larsson. Like, these are not really primo passing players. And Henrik Sedin, of course, is. But Henrik Sedin is so good, he should get both assists on some goals. So maybe William Karlsson is approaching that level, like approaching old Henrik Sedin level. But that is my biggest concern for William Karlsson and being able to continue racking up assists. I love that he gets to play with Marchessault. I'm just not sure. Just looking strictly at the numbers, I would love to see a reel of every one of his assists so I can personally judge if he deserves to be credited with them or not. But oftentimes, if a player has an abnormal amount of secondary assists, then they probably picked up a few more points than they should have.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah,
when you brought up the reel, it was funny because I remember last year there was an article where someone tried to debunk his shooting percentage woes by showing reels of how easy his goals were. Like, there were so many times where I was literally shooting into an empty net because of a 2-on-1 or whatever, and they basically proved their own point because Karlsson's not going to get those looks all the time, especially if people know this guy's arrived and are going to start defending him a bit better. So that's part of the shooting percentage luck, is that you're not always going to get those easy looks, and that's a reason to regress him further. I actually was unaware of the secondary assist split, but that's definitely alarming, and I would probably steer clear of Karlsson when drafting him, but not too far because he's still the top center there. He still gets to play with Marchessault. He's still on the top power play. So the opportunity is there, even if regression is likely coming for him.
Yeah, I think you have to sort of play it correctly. Like if other people are going to reach for him, expecting him to have the same season, then for sure let them have him. But if everyone is of the same mindset, there's no way he can repeat. Don't let him fall too far. Because like you say, he's still a top line, top power play guy. It's such a great situation. It's hard not to get points. Now they just got Pacioretty, which I guess it depends on which of these power play scenarios we lay down, whether that's good or bad for him. Okay, let's end with defenseman, just like we started, back with Burns and Torrey Krug. I want to end with John Carlson, another guy who Brian and I were a lot higher on. We were expecting that he's going to be able to continue his 70-point pace that he put up last year once he finally took over as the for sure top power play defenseman on Washington. There's no more concerns of someone like Nick. I even forgot his name. That's how much I'm not concerned about him. Matt Niskanen, not even Nick. Matt Niskanen or Dmitry Orlov. Like, they're not going to be trading for Kevin Shattenkirk partway through the year to replace him. They just signed him to this big contract. At the same time, so your model has him super low. Well, not super low, but you have him down as a 53-point guy. And I'd imagine that's taken into account a couple of seasons where he was getting bumped from that top power play. So do you have other concerns for Karlsson, aside from just the fact that your model is accounting for a couple of years when he wasn't the main guy?
John Karlsson.
What did I say?
You said Karlsson, but we just talked about William Karlsson, and some of the things you said could have applied to Erik Karlsson. So John Karlsson, just to clarify.
Okay.
Yeah. I think I have his power play time adjusted for being like the 65% range. And I think last year he was maybe even 70, to be honest. But I think the 2 previous years he was still at that range. And last year was his big breakout. But I don't think we can expect that to necessarily continue if he has been top power play and been in the 50-point range before. And the reason they got Kevin Shattenkirk 2 years ago was because Karlsson wasn't getting the job done. So while last year was a great season for him, he's not, I guess, as safe because there's been seasons where he's been the same exact role and not performed at that level.
Elon, I guess you're expecting I'll chime in.
Well, that's been the pattern, Brian, that you talk after Dom talks.
Okay. I can do this.
The most professional team in podcasting, right here. We gotta let Dom go, Brian. Let's
okay.
Let's I got it.
I got it. John Karlsson also set that career high in shots with 237 last year. Had other career highs in his shot and shot attempt rate. So he's older, and I feel like this is where circling back, where you say your model regresses defensemen harder than forwards, and forgive me if I'm butchering some sort of wording analytically about that, like comes into play. Because I still feel like John Karlsson can essentially repeat last year, because I think most of the Capitals playing with him can do the same. But I understand anyone's reluctance. He really reminds me going into fantasy drafts this year of what Victor Hedman was last year when he had I think it was a 72-point season. And everyone was like, yeah, I kind of expected this, but can I really truly expect it again? Do I want to gamble? And Hedman was occupying this space where he was between like the most elite tier of defensemen and then the next bunch, and Hedman was right in the middle. I feel like that's where Karlsson sits in a lot of draft rankings this year.
Yeah, definitely. Sorry. I just want to look at his ice time because I have him for 23 and a half minutes, and that might be why he's so low, because he might have had a silly amount last year that
he did. He had he saw 77% of all available power play minutes for blue liners in Washington, more than he's ever seen. And he'd never seen more than 63% share before of his team's power play minutes, which essentially I think he was producing at similar rates in past years. He just never had the minutes to get all the way up to 70.
And he played 25 minutes in total. So I think I bumped him down a minute and a half, and I put the power play percentage a little lower than 77%, and that might be why. But at the same time, the 2 years prior, he was only at 40 to 50 point pace. So I think 68 is a little aggressive unless everything just goes well in Washington again.
Yeah, I know Brian's also super down on Alex Ovechkin after our Washington chapter in our almanac.
Whatever you do, Dom, do not tell Elon that Alex Ovechkin is not likely to
Don't
beat.
spoil it, Brian. Don't spoil it. This is my favorite part of the almanac. I want people to hear it.
Okay, we'll tell Dom after.
Yeah, listen to the Washington chapter. Okay, Dom, this was so great. I could just go through every single player in your guy. Like, it's pretty cool. Your spreadsheet, like, you have every player, but then also you know all the stuff about them, even beyond the fact that you didn't even have to like consider their line combinations when you came up with your projections, but yet you like know every. Oh yeah, I totally don't know what I'm. Let me just start the whole thing over again. I don't know what I'm doing. Sorry, it's late. Normally we record at 9. I mean 8. Ugh. Okay. Dom, thanks so much for coming on the show. This was so great. I could just talk about all these players with you all night long. There's so many more players that I'd like to discuss, though I will say again, we agreed with you on most of the guys. It's just these outliers that make it look like we disagree on a bunch of things. But overall, I'm pretty happy, Brian, that we agreed with Dom's spreadsheet. And everyone, you've got to check it out for yourself. keepingkarlsson.com/Dom. Also, Dom's a great follow on Twitter. So many like funny tweets all the time and interesting. Great combo of it. So you could follow him at, I don't know, I don't have that in front of me, at Dom Luszczyszyn, and there's no way people are going to know how to spell that. So how do you recommend for people to find you on Twitter? Just search for Dom Hockey or something?
I think that if you search Dom L, I'm probably near the top. There are not many Doms in the world, and I doubt many of them are verified. So I should be up there smiling with my sunglasses and some incredible last name that you will probably ask me how to pronounce. But you did amazing pronouncing it. Like, first try, nailed it. I don't know if you just remembered it from last year or if you are just really good, but that was incredible to witness.
Thank you. You know, I definitely did just remember from last year because we named the episode Courteous Luszczyszyn. Oh no, now I shouldn't have. I blew it. I was all good, and then I blew it right now. So maybe I should just end it here. But yeah, follow Dom on Twitter. Get his guide. Get his almanac. Oh my God. I'm just gonna let you go. Okay. Yeah, I just remembered it from last year. It's a really fun name to say, and I nailed it perfectly. Never get it wrong. But okay. Thanks again for joining us, Dom. And yeah, we'll hopefully talk to you again soon. Maybe at least at the latest again next year. But good luck with all of your drafts and all of your leagues that you already drafted. And yeah, thanks again for coming on the show.
Thanks for having me. It was a great time.
All right.
Yeah, thanks for coming and complimenting us on our pronunciation. That might be a keeping Karlsson first.
You didn't even try. I don't know what you're talking about. It was an Elon thing.
Darn it. Everyone likes Elon more than me. There we go.
I was leaning towards you until you just didn't even bother trying.
Luszczyszyn.
Oh, that's terrible. We're back to Elon. Sorry.
Luszczyszyn. But I named the episode last year, which I think was very clever.
All right. Well, Shana Tova, everybody. And we'll catch all of you regular listeners with a next regular show next week. No more interviews. I promise. We'll be back to just Brian
what do you mean
and
you promise? The interviews are great.
I know. I don't know why I said that. I love the interviews. But maybe
you should promise more interviews.
Okay, well, there's not going to be. So I should have said I'm sorry, not I promise. Okay. Bye, everyone.
Bye.
Bye, Dom.
Bye.
Thanks a lot. That was fun.
Yeah, it was a lot of fun.
Thanks so much. Yeah. Cool. So I'll get that edited and then I'll send you the link to the episode once it's out.
All right, I will retweet it for sure.
Wow. Awesome. Thanks so much.
All right.
Enjoy the football game.
Time for football.
Go Jets.
They won already. I'm pretty sure it's Oakland,
right.
LA now.
Wow. The Battle of California. That's my football analysis. All right. You don't have to stay anymore.
All right, guys. Thanks for having me. Take care.
Bye, Dom. Thank you.
Bye. Okay, Brian.
Yeah.
Now we could record our intro to the show. I never ended up throwing to it, so let's just make it the intro.
So how about we make it 30-second pre-roll?
Okay, well, let's just do. I want to mention the things. Didn't you want it last time? You wanted to mention giving us an iTunes review. Do you still want to talk about that?
Okay.
You don't have to do a whole thing. You just be like, I could even just do I could do the iTunes part. How about I'll start, I'll mention the almanac. Okay, I'll just do it. Let's just go and one take. It'll be great.
One take, very, very simple.
Here we go. Hey everyone, Elon here. We're about to Q2. Hey everyone. Hey everyone, Elon here. We're about to send you to an amazing interview that Brian and I did with Dom Luszczyszyn. Oh, now I forget. Now he got in my head. Is it Luszczyszyn?
I don't know. You were saying it right.
Okay.
I think it's Luszczyszyn. I said Luszczyszyn.
Okay, I'm just gonna say Dom L.
Just say Dom.
Oh yeah, with the great Dom. That's kind of weird.
Y'all know who it is.
Dom Luszczyszyn. Oh no. Luszczyszyn. Dom Luszczyszyn.
I think that's it.
Hey everybody, Elon here. We're about to send you to a great interview that Brian and I did with Dom Luszczyszyn talking about projections. But before we get to it, Brian, you're here. I suck at this.
Do you want me to do it?
Okay, go ahead.
Luszczyszyn?
Yeah.
All right. Hey everyone, Brian here. We're about to get into an interview with the fabulous Dom Luszczyszyn, writer of The Athletic. But first, a couple quick things we want to tell you about. First off, Elon.
Hi.
Oh, I don't know what the first thing you wanted to say was.
First off, Elon.
That's a chance for you to say it.
I see. Yeah, I'm here as well. And yeah, first off, let's mention, as we've been doing for the past little while, you're running out of time to listen to the world's first ever NHL audio almanac before the season actually starts. Brian and I put a bunch of time into it. You could get a 27+ hour audiobook at your disposal, breaking down the fantasy value of every single player. We reference it actually a lot in this episode. So if you want to get what we were talking about with all those references, check out keepingkarlsson.com/almanac to buy it. We'd love if you could support us there because we put a lot of time into it. We think it was really good. I think you're going to like it. I'm pretty confident. The second thing, if you want to become a patron of Keeping Karlsson, we're about to start the season, and there's a lot of perks that you can get if you check out keepingkarlsson.com/patron. You can check out everything that you will get if you want to buy Brian and I a beer, one of us a beer every episode, a beer. Once a month, if you want to buy Brian us a beer, once a month, we'd really appreciate it, as we're going to give you a full season of awesome fantasy hockey content. So you can check out keepingkarlsson.com/patron for that. Also, for that.
And that will give you a 20% discount on said almanac. First month almost pays for itself. Wow, what a deal. Elon, I also wanted to ask anyone listening, if you enjoyed the show, please give us an iTunes review. Like, write us just a nice little note on iTunes. It does us a little bit of a favor, is what I hear anyway. So please, if you haven't listened, that costs you nothing, just a few moments of your time. You can even start it now while you listen to the episode.
Okay, so enough jibba jabba, enough of us trying to ask you for stuff. Now we're going to give you something, this amazing interview with Dom L. Enjoy.
L, it's Luszczyszyn.
Dom, Luszczyszyn, Dom, Luszczyszyn, enjoy. Okay, that's the
Good job.
That was something. All right, thanks everyone for joining us live. Really appreciate that. It was a really fun chat. I think once we go back to our normal Elon and Brian episodes, then I'll be able to be more engaged in the chat. It's kind of a lot to keep track of two people on the call and also a chat room. Brian, though, seemed to still be able to have full conversations.
I was crushing it.
By the way, I was
really Chris, great question. And Chris was challenging my Islanders tax idea, and Alex was clarifying some quality of competition stuff. If you guys can remember to bring that up on a patron cast, that would be so great.
Yeah, we could talk about all that stuff in depth. Brian, by the way, that comment I made, I was just joking around because it was like 3 in a row. If Dom would finish talking, then there'd be a pause where like you all of a sudden realize it's time for you to talk. Like, yeah, I agree.
Yeah, that was me just buying myself a few extra seconds of time to think of what I wanted to say.
Maybe as I go through this edit, I'll cut out one of your yas so you seem like you're a more concise yar.
Do it.
Okay, so I'll get to work on that. Thanks, everyone. Bye.
Bye.
But Brian, don't leave just yet. Just don't leave just yet.
Okay.
Bye.